I'm Gerald LaRose from One Arrow First Nations. As of 2010, there are more than 582 known reports of missing or murdered Aboriginal women in Canada, with BC recording more than any other province or territory. Be more than a bystander. Break the silence on violence against women.
Go and walk into a stadium and thousands and thousands of people are cheering and they're watching on TV and they're following the exploits of the men on the field. These guys have a cultural platform, and this is a way to constructively use that to open up some space, some dialogue, some conversation, especially among men and young men and boys, on issues that historically a lot of guys have just shied away from, and they said, let the women take care of that. That's a women's concern. That's a women's issue.
It's an issue that affects our communities, as men, as fathers, as brothers, as husbands, as partners, as mentors to younger men. If an issue is occurring in our communities that's a detriment to our communities, how can we not feel a sense of responsibility and accountability to be part of the solution?
As a hetero-identified male, I'm taller, I'm bigger. Nobody is challenging me to sort of put me in precarious positions. And I often wonder what it would be like if I was more of a body that was perceived vulnerable. What would it look like to have to put things in the closet, so to speak? What would it have to be for me to hide certain things? So I like to think I'm comfortable, but I certainly haven't been challenged on it. And I think that's just part of the privilege of being a man in society that sort of looks this way.
So I often think that there's a lot of pressure, for example, on boys to be the person who's leading the sexual experience and who's supposed to know what they're doing and, be in charge. And I think people are afraid that if they ask, it's going to come across like they don't know what they're doing, which is true most of the time. And so, but they're afraid to lose face. So I think that a lot of the time people may have uncomfortable breaches of boundaries because they're so nervous about the social dynamics that would take place if a person were to ask.
I find myself now, after doing a lot of work internally, that I am a much more of a sexual being, if you will, which doesn't mean I need to have multiple partners at this time. It doesn't mean that I need to, feel that I have to do things that I'm not comfortable with doing anymore, which I have in the past. It just means that I identify as a sexual being much more than I ever have. So I think my journey with a healthy sexual life is starting now at 43.
Now I'm getting older and toning things down. It's not such a big part of my life anymore. But you never know. I might meet somebody, but you never, I'm happy just to cuddle, massage, just to show affection.
One of the great things about getting older, there are many, and this is a particularly good one, is that you just become really comfortable in your own skin. It's like, this is it. It's not getting any better, and hopefully it won't get any worse. But this is where I am right now in my life, and I'm really happy, right? And so and part of that again is this sense of you're fine, whatever way you are, you're good. You don't have to be something else. You just have to be who you are. And I think what sex ed can do, if it's done in a way that's supported and positive, is that it can give young people the message and the understanding that they're fine, just the way they want to be, and that they need to have the sort of the support to just go forward and just love who they want to love and be who they want to be. And if someone else is telling them that that's not right, they can't do that, to have the tools and the critical thinking skills to be able to say, what's going on there, and to be able to pull that apart a bit and see the dynamics of whatever it is, prejudice or racism or sexism, homophobia, whatever it is that's behind that. They have the skills to be able to deconstruct that. So that's what I hope for my own kids.
I just think that sexuality should be talked about as many other aspects of our lives are talked about. So it's like nutrition. I think to me that that having conversations with your children very, very young when they start to ask you questions about their body, and that you start then, and that it continues on.
If you can ask your parents about sexuality, you can ask your parents anything. And it's the one subject that is missing from so many family conversations.
We are taught that it's not cool and that we have to act like we know everything, but nobody knows what's going on. There are so few people, especially young people, who actually understand what's happening with their bodies and are understanding what's happening on the dates, or people are trying so hard to deconstruct everything, and actually it's really confusing, and there are lots of questions, and it's so important to get the answers, and you can totally get the answers, and there are a lot of resources. So I'd want people to know about the resources.
There's a lot of fear around sexuality, and I think if we can even get to the point where we can say, well, we don't know everything about sexuality, but we're learning to be less afraid and learning to bring magic and joy back into sexuality, open-mindedness and flexibility, and, you know, not being so stuck on labels. We can use words as just bookmarks, you know, just as like a handle on something for a while, but to be a little bit cheeky with our use of words. So even when I say I'm a woman, you know, I'm kind of saying that with quotes because what does that mean anyway?
I'm very interested in gender and how Sikh youth come to see themselves in the world as gendered bodies. So what does it mean for a baptized Sikh boy who has a beard and a turban going to school? Does he feel that his masculinity is subservient, less on in a hierarchy than a normalized white body would be in schools? What does it mean for a Sikh girl who has been told by her family to cover up most of her body? And what is it like for her to express her own femininity in the world in high schools? So I'm interested in that, where bodies of gendered bodies and race come together.
If the frame or the paradigm that we're working in is that our learners or that our clients are heterosexual, cisgender, monogamous, then if that's the frame we're thinking through, all the language that we use ends up being heterosexist, cis-sexist, and full of judgments about how people choose to live their lives or their or experience their relationships. And that is profoundly alienating.
We're playing a role, we're adhering to a certain script, and that script has caused a lot of pain for a lot of people. The rigid boundaries of this script, I think of the potential when we're released from this script, this performance, what could be a livable life if we didn't have this policing of our own sexuality and gender? What are the possibilities for a democracy? And so to link sexual freedom to a concept such as citizenship and democracy, that's something that I'm interested in.
What I find really critical, and I think sometimes I might go a little bit overboard with my own kids, is that I really want them not to ever get the message that sexuality is a bad thing. Right? I want them to know the complexities around sexuality, but to never be able to talk to me about it, or to be shamed by their bodies, or to not understand what changes are going on, or what's happening. You know, I don't want any of that. So both my ex-partner and I are very clear that we want them to be really have a sense that their bodies are really important and are to be respected, and others are to be respected, and so it's been great getting older in that respect. Really wonderful. In a community like Vancouver, where there is sexual diversity, gives wonderful opportunities for my kids to see that kind of respect in action. So
I remember the very first TV interview I did was on Studio 4 with Fanny Kiefer. And I remember how excited I was, and my wife and my daughter being very excited about this. And they introduced me on the show as couples counselor and sex therapist. Now, about a year later, and I didn't even know that my elder daughter, Malaika, really even appreciated my title in the show. My mother came to visit us. And as all grandmothers do now and then, she looked at Malaika and said, "What do you want to become when you grow up?" thinking from an ethnic family, doctor, lawyer, engineer, something like this. And my daughter looked at her and said, I want to be a sex therapist. She didn't even know the word sex, but she said it so openly, uninhibitedly. And my mother was kind of stunned by the answer. I went up to my daughter and I looked at her and I said, hey, give me a high five. That created for our family the sense that you can say anything dealing with sex in an open, honest, non-judgmental way, and you'll be fully accepted.
My name is Sarah Callahan. I'm Métis. My family originated in Saskatchewan, and I grew up on Vancouver Island. I'm the intern program lead for Chimamuk Aboriginal Program. We are a provincial program that is housed at the BC Centre for Disease Control. Chimamuk is a Chinook jargon word meaning new work or new idea. Our mandate is to provide culturally appropriate HIV, sexually transmitted infection, and hepatitis education, resources, and wise practice models throughout British Columbia and Aboriginal communities. Within British Columbia, there are over 200 First Nations communities, and each of those communities are at different levels of what we call readiness. And so where one community might be ready to freely hand out clean needles and condoms, another community might not be ready to get past the idea of abstinence. So for us, it's really recognizing where the community is at and then giving them some strategies that they can use back in their home communities.
I work particularly with a project embedded in Chimamuk called Around the Kitchen Table, and so we work with teams of Aboriginal women, teams of 4 Aboriginal women who are trained as facilitators, and then they return to their communities to deliver a series of 6 sessions around healthy sexuality, HIV and hepatitis C education and information. While we are fortunate enough to be able to provide the training, the true work lies with these teams of women who are all across BC, and I believe we have more than 80 of them at this point in time that are doing this work. And even when we see women come to the training, I think there's something around the passion that they come with in order to be able to provide this education in their communities that is empowering for me as an educator to be involved with.
There's a wonderful scene in Kathleen Corelli's Mandolin where the father is talking to the daughter, and he says she's fallen in love with the soldier, and he said, you know what? I know when you fall in love and your heart throbs and the world is alive and you're in this euphoria. He says, but eventually that will end. And you would think that when that ends, there is a sense of loss, something is lost. But he says, in actual fact, there's something that is gained in that. And that always had huge meaning for me, that the love that's beyond infatuation is more powerful than the infatuation.
Yeah, I think that takes on even more meaning as we continue to go forward, 20 odd years later.
Yeah.
That I'm in a long-term monogamous relationship with a man doesn't mean that I see myself as heterosexual. I really feel that I have an incredibly fluid sexuality. I'm attracted to all kinds of people. Like, it really doesn't seem to be like restricted, like I really am genuinely attracted to people, like, and there are all kinds of people. So yes, I'm in this relationship with a man. It's lasted for 14 years. I love him. He's my life partner. He's wonderful, but at the same time, it's not like your brain or your body stops feeling sexual feelings toward other people.
And like, I can't imagine, I actually can't imagine living a life where you actually had to shut the door on those feelings all the time. Like, I think it would feel really restrictive. You know, I talk about that stuff with Blake all the time. You know, I talk about that with my husband, and you know, we talk about all these feelings that we have, because I value that. I value, you know, trust. I value being honest with him. And that's a big part of, I think, why our marriage is successful, is because we're able to talk about that stuff.
I would probably like to be the voice of encouragement of living out your fantasies and not being too afraid to do anything about it. Certainly it may take some research or some setting up or whatever, but if you have something that you'd really like to live out, I think that it's just good for the soul to get it done, to make it happen, and maybe make it happen several times over.
The way that you see sex right now is not necessarily the way you're going to see it tomorrow or next year, and to be comfortable with that rate of change, to give yourself permission to keep changing, and to not be not so fixed to a certain perception or perspective.
With time, you grow, and you make mistakes, and you do things, and you grow, and you get back up, and you grow.
You change, you evolve, you become more comfortable. It gets better in every way.
Trust that there is a place for your curiosities. Explore, experiment, be very, very compassionate with yourself and with others. We're all here without full instructions. We're writing, you know, our own history as we speak.
My advice would be to really search and look and find somebody to have that you feel safe and comfortable with in order to have those conversations.
First of all, it's okay to be you, and it's okay to feel exactly the way you feel, you know, and you should be nurtured and celebrated for that. I also think in terms of actually having sex, I think that, you know, we need to teach our youth as young as possible that it's okay, and in fact it's natural and it's fun, and we should be having sex. We should be having a lot of sex, as much sex as we want to, in the ways that we want to do it, as long as it's safe and informed and respectful for everybody involved.
If you're not hurting someone else in society, there's no reason that you should ever feel shame in who you are or what you do or how you express yourself.
And even when you are feeling that there's harm, to be willing to communicate about it, because sometimes when people become attracted to something that they feel might be harmful, might not be acceptable, then I would say just create some safety around yourself to be able to find a confidant, a person you trust that you can talk about with no censorship.
You should always have a code word that, you know, means stop. If something is going wrong or don't want to do it or it hurts or what have you, so that no matter how extreme it might seem, there's always a note.
Everybody's different, what they want to do is different, how their body reacts is different, and just coming to know what you want and having the confidence to say no, or having the confidence to say maybe and then no, is, I think, a really important aspect of coming into your sexuality and learning about sex.
Just because you said yes once doesn't mean you have to say yes again. Just because you said yes 20 times doesn't mean you have to say yes the next time. And so letting people know that consent is like something that they're allowed to give and take at any point, take back at any point, is an important message.
To be able to voice concerns, to be able to say no, to be able to say I don't know, and be able to really work with your partner, you know, in making choices together.
Make sure you know you have self-worth. Make sure you know you're beautiful and you're capable.
Pay attention to your body, your feelings, your desires, and really trust yourself, because nobody else can know you from the inside. And unless you trust yourself, actually there's no way for other people to offer that back to you.